Yeah.
Let me just message them on the one guy on Twitter, just because I messaged them on Discord, but just
Okay,
so they maybe
we're
they.
live, man. We're live. But
Okay.
you go ahead. We're just waiting for the basic swap guys to come in. We had a bit of a technical issue on my end. I was sending out the wrong link for the live stream, so I do apologize. It's kind of thrown everything into disarray. But the mission with today's show is we're going to be hoping in the next few minutes to talk to the basic swap DEX team or members from the team about the latest or the upcoming Decred integration. So if you haven't been following the proposals, this looks really exciting. The basic swap team have very similar principles to what the DCR DEX team have, where they're building an exchange platform that basically has no fees. So you can do atomic swaps. It has no fees, and one of the big things that everyone's looking forward to is the fact that Decred and Monero will be able to be swapped on this platform. So I think that's something that I think Exitus and a whole bunch of other people in the community are really excited about. So here we go. They're just coming in now. So let's get these guys in, and we'll stage. Here we go. This is CG. Hi, CG. Sorry for the confusion with the link. I hope you're well.
Hey, yes, thanks for having us in. Yeah, I was on
Oh,
the other room.
fantastic. Yeah, I've just my bad. I've been having a hell of a day here. We've basically got a hurricane, kind of stormy weather in England, and literally about
Oh,
2 minutes or 3 minutes before the show, I'm kind of battening down all my tables and chairs so they don't go flying everywhere. It's absolutely crazy.
okay.
I've never known it,
Hope that
but
goes well.
yeah, it'll be fine. If I run out in a minute, you'll know why. I was just introducing you guys before we get started. Just say how excited we are to kind of get this integration with Basic Swap going, and the fact that a lot of the members in the community are really looking forward to a Monero Decred swap. And it's great that you guys have similar principles to what we've got with the DCR DEX, where we're creating atomic swap trading with practically zero fees. I'm going to hand over initially to Exus to ask the questions because this is a show that Exus put together. So I think it's only fair that he kind of directs it the way he wants to. So over to you, Exus.
Hey CG, how's it going? Do you have anyone else coming?
Yes, we have Dr. Cap that I think was on the other room as well, but I sent him the new link, so he should be there in any seconds from now.
Yeah, I had it where like Zoom was or whatever the StreamYard was like redirecting me to the old show for some reason, which was a bit strange. But we can just wait a minute for him to come in. But yeah, ultimately the main value proposition here is people have been asking for Decred Monero atomic swaps for years, really since the DCR DEX was the concept was put out there as one of the first questions is will this work with Monero, because Monero is the leading privacy coin. And the answer was basically it won't, because Decred's atomic swaps are you need scripts, and Monero doesn't have scripts. So it was just one of those things where like it was like, oh, it won't work unless we do some major rework of our atomic swap code, and we don't want to do that just yet. We have to focus on other things. So it was really cool to see you guys submit that proposal.
Yeah, it's kind of almost what led to the creation of BasicSwap as well, is when we saw a paper go out in Monero by their contributors. I think it was contributor Hashed. He put out a paper, essentially a proof of concept of how to do Monero to Bitcoin atomic swaps with a sort of new type of atomic swap that doesn't require scripts, as you mentioned, was usually the hard requirement, right, to have scriptable outputs. And so this new atomic swap based on adapter signature was kind of a way that was built along the years. It's like building on top of previous research that people have done and culminated into that paper. And essentially, it's just a different way to do atomic swaps without scriptable outputs.
Yeah, and I've tried out the basic swap DEX myself, and it works really well. You guys have a nice UI. Um, and it's really cool to know everything's like super private. Though I will say on DCR decks, it is nice that because things are transparent, you can kind of monitor how many swaps are occurring, and you can kind of keep track of the volume and stuff, which is something it's a nice metric we like to keep track of.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of compromise of privacy. Let's say, yeah, on BasicSwap you can't really monitor the volume or the number of trades that take place throughout a day or a certain period. So I guess from a marketing or just getting a bird's eye view of the activity on the DEX, it gets a little bit more difficult. The metric that you can kind of check in terms to see how many swaps are taking place or things like that is really just the number of offers there's on the order book. That would probably be the only trackable metrics of the DEX.
Yeah, I guess we should just get started with some of these questions we have. I don't know how long it's going to take for. You said Dr. Cap was coming.
Yeah, I'll ping him again, but he should be here.
Oh,
Here
there
he
he
is.
Hey,
Sorry about that.
no worries. How's it going, guys?
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Great
very
to have
well.
you guys.
Well, it's fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Just bear with me. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my regular internet. So for some reason, literally about 3 minutes ago, my regular provider just cut out, which is why I was like, huh? But here I am.
Wow, brilliant stuff. Yeah, apologies for the wrong link. That was my bad. So I had a couple of technical glitches where I just sent out the wrong link. So I do apologise for that. But we've already started. Yeah, we've already started to kind of delve into the BasicSwap platform. CG's been absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to hand over to Exitus again. He's going to kind of walk through some of the things that he's interested in asking about. But yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, so first question is why did you decide to add Decred and create a proposal?
CG?
Well, yeah, no, we thought it just made sense. We actually didn't add any coins. It's launching in like a year and a half ago, our beta, and I guess just by posting on social media and stuff, we had actually a few Decred community members reach out to us. Well, one of you being, of course, you, Exitus, and you proposed or pointed us towards the Decred proposal system. And just from, as you mentioned earlier, I think just in terms of ideologies and what the both project stands for, it was kind of a good logical choice to go ahead with this, especially as Decred kind of holds a special place in our heart because at the very beginning, when we first started to experiment with atomic swaps, obviously we did it with Decred, and I think that goes all the way back to 2017 because you guys were actually quite pioneering on that. And I think it was a Decred to Litecoin swap, if I remember correctly, that we first did in 2017. So it was just kind of a logical way to go about things and a nice nod to projects that do contribute to the space.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys knew that because I feel like Decred doesn't get enough recognition for doing for writing the initial atomic swap tools and then doing the first atomic swap with Litecoin and Charlie Lee. Usually people are like, oh, in 2017 it was Litecoin and Bitcoin, the first atomic swap, and Decred kind of gets ignored. So I saw in your guys's your documents or your webpage you said Decred was the first, which was really cool. And so how did you find the proposal process on Politeia? I will say you guys had one of the best written development proposals we've seen from non-Decred developers. So it was really well written and you clearly did your research.
No, thanks. Yeah, to be honest, I really like the system. I think everything is streamlined. It's quite intuitive. We do have a similar system on Particle to push proposals based on the CCS system, but to be fair, I really like the Decred model. I think it's just much more complete and everything is included in it. I guess the same way you say the BasicSwap proposal was a model for other proposals, I think the Decred governance system, after trying it out in real life, I would say is the best one I've tried so far of all like DAO-like structures. It's I have really no complaint about it. Only good things to say about it.
All right, that's awesome. And so I guess we can start questions on BasicSwap itself. Could you give us an overview of the BasicSwap platform and its overall aims and goals?
Yeah, sure. It's a peer-to-peer decentralized exchange. It's a decentralized exchange which utilizes atomic swaps. So these are straight swaps. There are no middlemen, no intermediaries. The messaging for the peer-to-peer swaps essentially occurs on this sort of intermediary data layer, which is called the SMSG network. That's an end-to-end encrypted mixnet. So essentially, a lot of our atomic swap execution effectively occurs in an off-chain setting, but it doesn't require any sort of intermediary tokens or intermediary fees. So utilizing our DEX, it's a feeless DEX, which is atomic swap based. And because we utilize off-chain execution of smart contracts using this data layer, which we sort of built, it was a derivative or an evolution of the bit message protocol. And it's basically been designed to support smart contract execution and to support cryptocurrency payments on a network that is end-to-end encrypted, node-based, peer-to-peer. So the nice thing about that is through using that platform, we've been able to utilize an implementation of something called scriptless scripts, essentially adaptive signatures, and that essentially allows us to do atomic swaps with coins where traditionally you wouldn't be able to do atomic swaps with. So for example, Monero does not have programmable inputs, natively due to its code base and its design. Because of the SMSG layer supporting adaptive signatures, we've been able to build an implementation where you can do direct atomic swaps of Monero with Litecoin, with Particle, with Decred when it comes up, and indeed with any of our sort of essential coin pairings at base. So we are currently the only decentralized exchange in the world that actually supports bidirectional Monero atomic swaps. One of the nice things is, if you look at Litecoin, they also have Mimblewimble implementation. So it's almost like they utilize a dual chain architecture. And again, the utilization of adaptive signatures means that we can support atomic swaps through coins that are natively Mimblewimble. So once we get that implementation in place, you'll be able to do a Mimblewimble Litecoin to Decred atomic swap. And to our knowledge, that would be the only exchange in the world that currently, or decentralized exchange, that currently supports that in the atomic swap form. So really secure, incredibly private, incredibly transparent to the end users, the parties involved, incredibly safe, and like I said, no third-party fees, no third-party tokens, no middlemen.
Right. Sounds very similar to DCR DEX. I've tried out BasicSwap DEX, and I can say the process is all in all very similar. There's a few differences, like in BasicSwap. I believe your orders are only up for, I think it was 48 hours before you have to resubmit it. On DCR DEX, it's always up. Another thing with DCR DEX is you don't need to download the nodes and wallets in order to view the different markets. And maybe that's something you guys are going to change on BasicSwap, but on BasicSwap, you had to actually add the node and wallet in order to view that market, which I found a little interesting because, and also you have to sync the particle node. So when I first used BasicSwap, I loaded it up and I was like, oh, there's no orders on the market. So I almost considered just, not going through with it before realizing, okay, you have to wait for particle to download, then the orders start to populate and you can look at them. So I found that quite interesting. Now, I want to know what you guys think about Sarai DEX coming from, I believe it's Cake Wallet team is involved with that. Have you guys heard of Sarai?
Yeah, we did meet the developer at the Monerotopia conference last year, Luke Parker. It's interesting exchange that's going a different way about it. They're going more for the AMM type kind of user experience. So whereas people have to pull up coins and then there's an algorithm. I mean, I'm not expert on Sarai, but as far as I understand it, people put up coins and then they swap with each other through liquidity pools. And I believe there's a middle token as well, probably going to be called Sarai or something like that, that facilitate the exchange of different currencies. I'm not entirely sure exactly of all the intricacies of the exchange, but it's something along those lines. So I would say different use cases and different type of user experience. I think, as we mentioned in our proposal, just having a plurality of different types and approaches to decentralized exchanges is probably the best that we can get right now, especially in light of the tightening regulations on centralized exchanges. I think it's important that we get many different options, because there's going to be different reasons that people want to swap or trade coins, and one way might fit better for a certain type of use case compared to the other. So we're actually quite excited from a Monero perspective. We're quite excited to see the decentralized exchange landscape grow and evolve as time goes by.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to see the different innovations, and yeah, with Sarai DEX, I'm obviously it's not out yet, so we can't draw any conclusions, but it's definitely taking a different route than DCR DEX and BasicSwap DEX. And it's not as, maybe I would say, ideologically pure, where it's like, oh, you're gonna have a third-party token, and maybe you might not have full custody of your coins in certain instances. Phoenix, if you want to ask any questions, you can go ahead. I don't want to hog all the mic space.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely brilliant. It's great to hear from these guys. And one thing that I've just kind of taken in is the fact that very few people are trying to do this the right way. And as far as I can see, atomic swaps with this feeler structure is the purest way you can do it. And I really commend you guys for going down this route. The law of the MMM market, where you can put up a middleman token and you can drag in all of these fees is actually quite high. So the fact that you guys said, no, we're going to go down this route, we're going to do atomic swaps, we're going to make this completely peer-to-peer, it's very close to my heart. I mean, I'm obviously a massive supporter of DCR DEX, so it's interesting to me to see that we've got more platforms going down that route. One thing I'd like to see maybe in the future is maybe some kind of coordination between order books, if that would be a possibility, where in terms of DCR DEX, we've got market maker bots coming out, and it's still peer-to-peer, but where we're going to be arbitraging on centralized exchanges to pull actual orders into DCR DEX. It'd be really cool to see that with BasicSwap, see if we can pull in orders, place orders, and move them back and forward, just so that we have this seamless system where it doesn't matter if there's 100 different DEXs in the world, they're interconnected, and I do see that as a possibility. I mean, technically it's probably quite a challenge, but that's certainly something that I'm interested in. It's nice to see that we're not alone in this space anymore. There are other people trying to build great products with atomic swap. So yeah, great stuff. My next one was really is your question actually about the since you guys are not collecting fees, how are you going to fund the development? How are you going to push this thing forward?
Cap, maybe you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. We've got a couple of ways we go about this. If you look at our project, which is the Particle project, it has its own blockchain, as Exitus mentioned, the Particle part blockchain. And a proportion of our block emission goes to a decentralized treasury, where we have periodic votes on essentially how that basically gets spent. And typically our sort of 6 monthly vote is, do we continue to fund the existing development team? And that's been passing successfully over the last 2-3 years, actually. We've been kind of every 6 months we are getting the approval for the dev budgets. So they are getting some basic funding in the form of the part token. Now, that's very helpful, although one of the limitations of that is that the part token is relatively illiquid. So to kind of supplement that, we do kind of occasionally go to other communities and projects and say, are you sort of willing and happy to donate to us? Are you willing to help us support a shared mission and a shared goal? And I'll be really upfront with you. A lot of this is just ideologically driven. It's like, it's incredible when you get a couple of really hardworking people in a room, who not necessarily in the same room, but who are in the same space, who have this shared vision, a shared goal, and a shared strategy, and a shared commitment. I don't want to say religious, but in some ways that's almost like that kind of energy that you're drawing on to work together and say, yeah, we can do this, we can build this infrastructure, just partly because we can and because we know of the long-term benefits of that. And I think that combination of factors that I've just said can be very, very powerful. I think if you're willing to take a collaborative, open approach, and it goes back to what you sort of mentioned about being able to join up and share between, order books, having a conjoined liquidity ecosystem, having a collaborative approach. I'm like the most non-maxi person you're going to hear, right? I'm basically like, look, whatever works, liquidity literally just means flow to me. And so the more pathways you open up for flow, that's potential liquidity pathways for me, the more successful your ecosystem can potentially be. So that's my long-term approach. We've managed to kind of get by utilizing that setup, as it were. And that's been since 2017 through, I guess, 2 successive bear markets. So I'd say, yeah. I'm not going to say our funding situation's been perfect, but we've been getting periodic help to get key milestones done. And we're incredibly grateful to our community for the role they've played. And not just our community. I mean, we're really grateful to your community, for getting the approval across on the DCR integration proposal. That's a huge benefit to us. That gives us some real breathing room, and it's the same towards sort of the Monero community, Firo, PivX, Dash, Litecoin. They've all been just tremendously helpful to us. So.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. I mean, that's basically how DCR DEX has been built as well. They put up their proposals and then they get a year's worth of funding to build these things. So it's really nice to see that it's in-house, it's being developed in this way. I mean, I actually really like the approach, and I hope the DCR DEX guys end up listening to this, because I really like the approach of going to another platform saying, look, we want to list you, but pay us for this integration. We'll do the work, but you pay us for this integration. It's one thing Decred probably hasn't been very good at, if I'm honest. We've built the Faro integration, we built the Dash integration, but never once have we really reached out to those communities. And one thing I see from that in its initial stage is actual fact, by reaching out to the other community, you can also say, look, we don't really need the money, but we want to add the liquidity. We can get paid in Dash, and that can go straight on, and that can add the liquidity. And it helps jumpstart these things. I mean, we've had Zcash on our platform for quite a while, and to my knowledge, I don't think there's been a single trade on it yet, which has been really disappointing. And I really feel if we had reached out to the what they call it, the Z Fund or whatever it's called, and said, look, fund us a few £1,000 so we can actually build up some liquidity so we can run the full nodes or whatever. I can't help but think that would have been really, really beneficial. So yes, it's really nice hearing that approach. Sorry, Exitus.
I would say in Zcash's case, the issue is you need to run a full node, and for Zcash, it's something like 200 to 300 gigabytes. So we never had anyone from Zcash really come forward, even though we did market it to them, and we were like, hey, you can atomically swap Zcash and USDC stablecoin, and they would get tweets, retweets, likes, and they'd be like, oh, this is awesome, but no one really came forward to do it. And just like Phoenix said, there's this weird psychology where if OneCoin's developers aren't involved in a project, it's almost like that community isn't interested. Like everyone wants something their project built. And so if Decred had requested funds from Zcash to do something, it's possible it might have worked out better for DCR in DCR DEX's case, that people would have used it as opposed to just doing it completely free using DCR's funds. And it's like, oh, hey, we built this. And they're like, oh, cool, that's great. Well, we're not going to use it. And I think Zcash is even building their own atomic swap protocol or something. I saw something about it on Twitter. But yeah, they did add Dash and Firo. It's not live on the markets yet, but it is there, and we're hoping people will show up and do some atomic swap trades. I guess another question I have for you guys is for many of these coins, even Monero got delisted from Binance. You can still buy Monero with USD on Kraken in the US. So one of the big challenges is atomic swap technology. It's fantastic. It's great to use, but it's difficult sometimes to get users. I want to know what strategy do you guys have possibly to get people onto BasicSwap DEX and convince them hey, this is a better way to trade. Let's say Litecoin. You can buy Litecoin anywhere, and you guys added it to BasicSwap. You're even adding the privacy component, Mimblewimble, which I saw, and I also saw that you're going to the I think Dr. Cap, you're going to the Litecoin conference.
Yeah, I'm
in
going to
Nashville.
be presenting in Nashville, Tennessee in July. Yeah, that's right.
That's wonderful. So what exactly is your strategy to get Litecoin users onto BasicSwap, or if you have any strategy?
So yeah, so basically, I think let's go back to that bit where there are no third-party fees, there's no intermediary token to use our DEX. So that's the first thing. The other thing I kind of want to mention is with our DEX, although this isn't yet built into the GUI, there are basically these automated scripts that will, as you mentioned earlier, when you put an order, it expires after 48 hours if it's not taken. Now, one of the nice things that we've set up is essentially this kind of automated script where you just basically put a few inputs in. You say which coin you wish to trade against, which coin are you bidding for, which coin are you sort of offering in exchange, what kind of rate are you willing to swap that, and it will kind of query against an API. You can actually, an API, say CoinGecko or CoinPaprika or CoinMarketCap. The default settings CoinGecko, so it'll kind of look at the USD kind of the equivalent kind of value for that pair, and then you can set a premium either higher or even like a lower price. So effectively, you can basically set it to automatically republish orders. So you've basically got you've got a basic market making script in there, and there's no fees to use it. There's no fees for putting the orders on there. You just publish the orders, and it's done so in an automated manner. So you're just republishing these. You're just automatically publishing these, and it will update as the general price across the market shifts. So if there's like, every 50, you can set it every 15 minutes. It kind of rechecks the price every hour against the Oracle, but it will, you can set it every 15 minutes to check the price and then republish the order. So you've got a basic market making script in there. And I think that creates a basic liquidity driver incentive, because you've basically got what I call a privacy premium. So say you want to do a Monero Bitcoin atomic swap truly privately, no third parties, you could acquire your Bitcoin from a fiat exchange, and then you could swap it to Monero on, say, a 2.5% premium to current spot price on that trade using BasicSwap DEX. That's automatically profitable to whoever the provider of liquidity is. So there is a basic incentive there to generate liquidity. There is a basic network in place there to create arbitrage opportunities as well. So I think some of the underlying factors are there. So that's the short and kind of immediate term stuff. The more intermediate term stuff would be automating that into the GUI and kind of introducing additional functionality to make that more programmable and more robust as well. And I think the longer term stuff, it's really interesting. The longer term stuff is stuff that we're not really in control of, but I think is going to happen anyway. You kind of mentioned it earlier. The regulatory framework, certainly within Europe now, is becoming a lot more restrictive on privacy coins. If you look through the latest kind of EU framework documentation, I certainly did, it's very glaring when they say custodian exchanges cannot have coins with anonymization features. Just having the features alone is enough to kind of get you excluded under that framework guidance. So I think, but non-custodian solutions aren't affected by that. So you've got natural drivers to actually send liquidity into what I call the privacy liquidity ecosystem. You've got natural incentives to drive liquidity through the existing regulatory framework as it's evolving. I think another thing is to factor. I've said this before. I have been challenged on it, but I think CBDCs. A lot of people hate them. To me, I just look at CBDCs and go, okay, what's the underlying protocol? Can we adapt that so that it can be integrated into BasicSwap DEX? Because in theory, if you look at the architecture of BasicSwap DEX, and I suspect this is true of Decred DCR DEX as well, if you're utilizing an intermediary data layer that is adaptable to cryptocurrency protocols, what's stopping you from building native support for CBDCs into your DEX? I think in the mid to longer term, probably longer term, I suspect CBDCs will be a blessing in disguise for certainly the privacy liquidity ecosystem, and certainly for decentralized liquidity as a whole. So that's my general take.
Yeah,
awesome. Next question. Can you briefly describe your roadmap? I think that's one of the one thing I'm really interested in is how you guys innovate your DEX versus the path DCR DEX is going to take in its future developments.
No, that's a great question, and actually it kind of will feed back into some things you mentioned earlier. So as you mentioned, at the minute when you're installing BasicSwap DEX, you kind of have to run a particle node. The reason for that is simple. Before BasicSwap DEX was the particle marketplace, and the particle marketplace was actually built in parallel with the SMSG network. So the underlying architecture was kind of integrated. That's why when you set up BasicSwap DEX, you're downloading Particle Core because the code for the SMSG network is built into that. You don't need the part token. Let me emphasize that to use it. It's just the way it was built. One of the things we're looking to do is kind of make our underlying architecture a lot more modular. So part of that will be separating the code and the architecture for the SMSG network from the Particle blockchain entirely. So that would be one of the, that's on our map, and that's certainly part of what we've been working towards, so that we can enable a much more modular framework for our decentralized application ecosystem. So that's one thing. The next thing is, as you mentioned, at the minute you have to download full nodes and run them 24/7. So one of the next things we want to do is enable light client support. So rather than having to download entire blockchains for the individual coins you want to trade, you don't have to do that. It'll kind of, just get a much faster sync, just select the coins and just crack on with it, as it were, rather than waiting for, 57 GB blockchain. I think that's Monero or Bitcoin. That's Bitcoin. And having to do that for each successive chain, because that's a lot of bloat on your local machine, and we want to minimize that kind of burden. And that's a barrier to entry at the end of the day. So it's really about recognizing the barriers to entry, the barriers to adoption, and finding pragmatic means to remove them. There are obvious trade-offs in terms of it's a little less decentralized, it's a little bit, you get what I mean, but that improves the convenience factor. So light client support is the next thing, so you don't have to download entire chains and have them running on your machine locally 24/7. And then after that, or in conjunction with that, actually, something we've been exploring is something called the web framework. So at the minute, you're having to install local desktop applications on a Windows device, a Linux device, or a Mac device. So you're downloading a dedicated application and then essentially running it 24/7. What we'd like is for our architecture to be structured in such a way that it can basically be, the web framework is basically a way of saying, here is the framework that will enable you to connect your website or your mobile app directly to one of our underlying services. Now, that may be someone running a node somewhere, it's literally a framework that points to that node. And so instead of you as the end user having to then download the application, download the full nodes, sync everything up and run it 24/7, you as an end user can go, I'm going to www.basicswapdex.com or decreddex.com, and it's then connecting to a remote instance of that DEX, and then enables you to still utilize. And the same with our marketplace and any of our sort of ecosystem decentralized applications. Go to the website, we'll download this mobile app, which then connects to a remote instance of that decentralized service, and then allows you to kind of use it without having to go through all the different setup stages. So that's kind of our roadmap in a nutshell.
Just to interject just a little bit. Sorry, Exitus.
Yeah.
Out of interest, because you're talking about a light client where there's obviously your server and everyone routes into that server. Are you going to keep the current infrastructure alongside of it? So
yes,
so you
absolutely.
have the fully peer-to-peer infrastructure, but you can also use less of a peer-to-peer if you want that streamlined experience.
Exactly. So this is about providing choice to our users. It's this idea that, look, if you want the fully decentralized, fully private experience, do what you're currently doing, which is download the client, sync the nodes, run them 24/7. If you are someone who's put off by that or doesn't have the resources or the time, utilize a light, but you're willing to run it on your machine, utilize a light client approach. If you just need to make one trade in a blue moon, or if you're, if you're grandma, go to utilize existing infrastructure, download a mobile app, it connects to an instance. So it's having all of those options in place, because you're right, we don't want to compromise the decentralization. We don't want to compromise the core decentralization, the core privacy, the core non-custodian nature of our network. We just want to have a series of options that improves accessibility, that improves convenience. Because I think I've said this on a few talks I've given before, the real barrier to privacy and the real barrier to adoption of decentralized technology is convenience and usability. I think those are the two things that people really need to focus on. If you look at the stuff we're talking about, shows that we've got the decentralization balance right. It shows we've got the privacy balance right. But what we haven't quite got is that, if you go back to Bitcoin I remember Bitcoin in 2011, and I remember this was my first experience of Bitcoin, was going to the Bitcoin website, and I saw like 12 different options, and it was like light clients, MT-GOPS, yada, yada. I think you just need to have a very clear 3 strategies, hardcore, light, web mobile, and that's it. You just need to I think you just need to have a very clear way of presenting those options and saying, this is the option if you want the most privacy and you want to have the most control. This is the option if you want to make a slight trade-off, and this is the option where you are making more trade-offs, but it's very quick and easy to use. And I think that's the way to go. And then once you've kind of solved those barriers to adoption, which is fundamentally convenience and user interface, the adoption will take off, and it will spread like wildfire. The ecosystem will grow, we'll achieve our goals, we'll all rest happy. That's my way of looking at it.
Lovely. Thanks for iterating on that, for going into that. That's really nice to hear, actually. It's good.
Yeah, if I might add something also going further in the roadmap, and that ties into how we're going to be raising adoption as well, is once we've got our marketplace application and BasicSwap DEX more web compatible, at some point the ultimate vision is to almost sort of combine both, and using BasicSwap as the checkout option on the marketplace. So just for reference, the marketplace application is kind of like an eBay marketplace. So you have sellers and buyers, but it's entirely decentralized and private. But you do have to use part as the settlement currency, because of we have a smart escrow, 2-party smart escrow kind of system that protects transactions, but you got to use part to use that. But and it also touches back on what we were discussing earlier, that in cryptocurrencies there seems to be this sort of tribalistic approach with some projects, that people will try to reinvent the wheel just to say that their project did that thing, and if it's coming from another project, then it might not be used as much. And one of the goals with BasicSwap is and the marketplaces, we're trying to break those barriers, or make cryptocurrency more open in a way. So by combining BasicSwap as a checkout option of the marketplace, then this would allow any other community to use the marketplace as if it was a marketplace application for their own currency. So say, for example, you see a product that you want to buy on the marketplace and you actually want to pay in Decred, you would have the ability to just select Decred and make a Decred payment at time of checkout. And it's also what we mentioned in the proposal that we did, when we said that by adding Decred into the BasicSwap DEX is actually adding Decred to the whole BasicSwap and particle ecosystem. It's just becoming part of our broader vision that we have, which extends further beyond just the DEX. We're actually trying to build a whole ecosystem that's open to all cryptocurrencies, and I think it's probably one of the most ideal ways for crypto to go, because when you eliminate those barriers, you kind of get possibilities for collaborations of many teams together, and just furthering what we're trying to do at a much higher pace.
Yeah, the particle marketplace is really interesting. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Decred's kind of trying to do something similar with our Lightning Network platform called Bison Relay, and have decentralized stores where everything's private. But your product is very far along, and it was interesting how you can even chat with the seller. Is that I believe that's probably a private encrypted chat, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really exciting. But yeah, if you
it
guys want to
uses
talk
the
about
SMSG network that Cap mentioned earlier. So we kind of use it for different purposes. So on BasicSwap, it populates the order book, and that's why you also have to wait for the whole chain to be synced up to see the orders, because they live in that sort of peer-to-peer network that has to be synced as well as the blockchain. And so for the marketplace, it's used to propagate and host listings and converse between buyers and sellers. So it's really kind of like a data and messaging layer that has different kind of purposes within the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really surprising. I was surprised that the particle token has such a low market cap, given what you guys are doing, the innovations you guys are doing, not just with BasicSwap, but even with the marketplace. Feels pretty fleshed out. So I was really surprised when I came across particle token, and I think it's only like 5 million market cap, and you compare that to all these meme coins and all these literally junk coins that are getting all this popularity, and it's like. You guys are, I guess, in a somewhat of a similar position to Decred, where you relatively get ignored by the general market, even though you're doing these really great things.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm used to it. I think I'm quite understanding of how. Firstly, I'm my personal background, emergency medicine. I work with a lot of people who I would consider retail trader or retail investors, amateurs, amateur investors, amateur traders, and I understand the psychology behind it. Look, I was telling people to buy Ethereum in 2016 at $10, and they were ignoring me till it was $1,000. I'd tell them again at $80, and they would ignore me till it was $4,000. I was telling them last year when it was 800, it's the bottom again. Look at where the daily volumes have gone. And I'd point to the metrics, and I would kindly and carefully explain how the whole. I would literally go into like things like Wyckoff theory and how actual trading mechanics that provide liquidity and value to an ecosystem work. I said, listen, you know exactly where I've been. Just do it. At the end of the day, I don't blame retail traders. At the end of the day, they've got families, they've got jobs, they've only got so much free time. Their attention can only be focused on so much. And I understand what it's like to be in a position where you have less disposable income and you have many conflicting and competing priorities. So in that mindset, I can kind of understand a get-rich-quick mentality very easily. I really can understand the draw to that. And meme coins, they offer the casino-like experience. And at the end of the day, underlying every single meme coin is either a single or a small group of liquidity providers who happen to have a ton of Bitcoin or a ton of fiat or a ton of some highly liquid, cryptocurrency on the side that they're willing to trade back and forth amongst themselves to boost up the value. And most retail traders, to be fair, they're starting to understand that more and more. They still want to ride that circus. The thing is, I'm always a believer in the tortoise and the hare. It's my favorite story. The more I spend in cryptocurrency, the more I tell people about the story of the tortoise and the hare. If you're looking at a big long-term ideological perspective, a big long-term ideological project or experiment, that's a marathon. That's not a sprint. Hares do sprints, tortoises do marathons. And the difference between a hare and a tortoise is that the tortoise is just incredibly focused on getting to its end goal, and it's willing to take a slow, steady, focused, singular path to get there, and it's not easily distracted. The hare will sprint from left to right, A to B to Z, and look in every single corner and run out of energy and probably have several naps and get caught out. And this is the great phrase: time in the market often beats timing the market. You can try and play cryptocurrency shitcoin casino all you like, But at the end of the day, this is one of the reasons I really respect Decred. I was back around in 2017 when you guys launched. In my mind, I had you down as a fork of Dash, or certainly came up at the same time. I really like the fact that you guys were focusing on decentralized governance. I thought that was really, that at that time, that was, and it still is now, that's still very much the focus. The fact that you've kept that focus is incredibly respectable. The fact that you're building meaningful projects that are dedicated to that underlying ideology is really respectable and really respectful, because if you look at where cryptocurrency is now in terms of the current speculative liquidity market, it is digital gold, it is ETFs, it's about things that have nothing to do with decentralization. And I could go into a whole spiel about wealth inequality and how growing wealth inequality over the last 20 years has basically given rise to growing speculative markets and growing interest in speculative markets, for the simple reason that they offer the only way out for the majority of retail traders who have been crushed by 20 or 30 years of rising inflation against real terms pay cuts. So they have less and less disposable income, and their infrastructure has been declining because we've had 15, 20 years of austerity. So there have been massive cuts to public services. So their standards of living have been going down. Their real terms pay has been going down. Their disposable income's been going down. And they're looking, the very concept of what some might have called the American dream in America, or social mobility in Europe and in the UK, the opportunity to climb above one's current standing, that's been going down massively. Listen, when I was a medical student back in 2000, when I was finishing in 2010, my student loan, I was on max because I came from a poor background. I had 27K student loan. Now, just to get through med school, you need £100,000, right? That wouldn't be affordable to me now, right? So the opportunity is going. So if you look at the retail guys, I'm sorry to go on about this little rant of mine, but they're going to look at where the get rich quick opportunities are, and that's speculation. I can't blame them for that. But if we're fortunate enough to be in a position where we can genuinely work towards building something better, I say, why don't we? Let's do that. We have the time, we have the resources, and we have the patience, and we can play a better game than just the speculative one. I, more than anyone, understand how liquidity works. I, more than anyone, know how I could turn particle from trading at 40 cents into $5 overnight. It's not a case of if, but when. But that's not me trying to say I'm going to manipulate the market here. It's me saying we wait for the time is right. We make sure the pieces are in place, that people have something that can create organic, meaningful, non-speculative value. That's really all I care about. I want people to use the service and go, oh, that is actually the next Facebook. That's made my life, not Facebook in this, all the horrible consequences, but in the sense of that's the next Facebook. That's made my social media connectivity so much easier. I no longer have to make 10 phone calls to coordinate a group of 10 to have a meeting on this date. I can just send a generic message to everyone in my friend circle. Oh, it's no longer a case of that, it's taking me 5 minutes to find something. It's like Google back in 2007. Oh, it takes me 30 seconds to get the piece of information. Not Google now, mind you, but Google back then. So this is what I mean about convenience and pragmatism and timing, not timing the market in terms of movements, but in terms of timing the technology and the convenience and the usability and so many other factors to adoption, getting these things in place. That's what's important. And that's about working together at the end of the day, working together, all of our different projects that are working together, that's nice. Even though we may have our different takes on technology or different focuses or areas, we're still part of this wonderful ecosystem that's just adapting and evolving in the most strange, crazy way. And it was so far ahead of the curve in terms of how much we understand this. And that barrier between that group I've just described to you, we're privileged enough to have the time to understand the consequences of these things. But to communicate that gap of information, that's huge. You just have to build services that people use. So sorry, I just went on and on, but that was my point.
That's good. No, it's a good point actually, and I think yeah, and it really does say why we're at where we are with the speculative market, and when you put all of those factors into play, you can see why legitimate projects are taking a back seat, because they want it short, they want it quick, and all the rest of it. But and it's more power to people that are actually building this stuff, knowing that you know, in 10 years time when all this passes, or 5 years time when all this passes, you know, we have to come out the other side. It has to be something that resembles something that's actually worthwhile doing. So yeah, fair play to you. I think that's brilliant.
Wonderful. I just want to ask this one question someone asked in the comments from Big Dog. He says, does BasicSwap DEX, the guys, did you get positive feedback from your community hearing that Decred is coming to your DEX?
Oh God, yeah, that's been great. It's so nice. Decred is a respected and well-known entity within our community, so we were really happy to kind of get that proposal passed, and you know, as a community, yeah, of course, it goes back into like our broader vision of it's nice that we're bringing more and more communities together, and yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah. Okay, next question is, DCR DEX uses a fidelity bond to prevent bad and undesirable behavior like trades not being completed or users backing out of atomic swaps. Does BasicSwap deal with such issues? Or do you? I know you guys. I've used BasicSwap. I know there's no bond, but do you have any plans to try to prevent this? Now, in Decred's case, I think we are going to lower this bond amount. It is for Decred right now, which is about $100, and it's been kind of acting as a roadblock to users. So the fidelity bond, the way it works is you put forward $100 for Decred, and after 2 months you get the money back. So you eventually don't have paying anything, but to the end user, it's kind of this hassle. So I think we are going to reduce it, or we're going to one of the lead developers is going to make it so you can generate fidelity bond codes for free and then give it out to people. But yeah, our question is basically: are you going to have ways to prevent users from messing with your exchange if that's even possible?
So
Yeah,
CG,
well,
I feel, yeah.
yeah.
No,
It's kind of an issue with atomic swaps, right? Kind of draining fees by backing out of atomic swaps and things like that. We don't have a system such as the bond system right now, but we've been in the past 3 weeks working on, I would say, something similar, essentially using part to act as a security deposit to ensure that both parties remain honest. It's not an ideal solution, so we do want to make it optional for the liquidity provider to either add that requirement to their offers or not. uh,
one
we
thing I will say is it's that, you know, there is a slight mechanism that's in place already, which is that if you look at the SMSG network, it uses, for every message send, there's a small proof of work, essentially calculation that's performed. So you can't just spam the SMSG network as a single node with a million messages at once, because the proof of work challenge starts going up exponentially in difficulty. So there is some resistance, but as CG said, you know, at the minute, you could post a single order or a handful of orders, and you could then cancel them, which, you know, you control. You can use our DEX to troll. So if you're a bad actor, if you're willing to sit there and then, you know, if you've not enabled auto accept on the bids, so you can, on the current iteration, you can have bids set to either auto accept, in which case they go through fully once they've been taken, or not. If they're not on auto accept by default, then, you know, the offerer can manually cancel the bid, which is effectively going to troll, you know, whoever the taker is. I think there is a certain amount of physical work involved if you are going to be trolling. And like I said, there are some measures in place to prevent you doing like a million at once, you know, spurious orders. You can't just spam that from the network. It's not designed like that. But you're right, because that risk exists. You know, as CG mentioned, we're working essentially on a kind of optional fee. It's like, well, put this up, you know, and it's kind of an anti-spam fee as well. CG?
Right, yeah, well, that's with the current version of SMSG. They're more like temporary solutions. On the longer term, we're planning to essentially put out a new version of the SMSG network. We're just calling it SMSG2 for now, but we'll probably take on a different name. But as part of this new version that will be coming out, there'll be I guess we could describe it as a node whispering system in which nodes constantly communicate in the background with each other, and they, let's say, propagate a sort of reputation score. And so nodes that misbehave or, have the tendencies of dropping swaps, for example, things like that, it gets propagated through the network, that information, and then we'll be able to build a system that prioritizes, nodes that are known to behave well, or maybe add a sort of score to it. Different ways with that information that we can pull from the network, and then better guide users in hopefully prioritizing nodes that behave well. I think what it comes down to ultimately, it's one of the downside of atomic swaps is because it involves on-chain fees, and there's very little ways that we know to actually force someone to go through the whole process of an atomic swap once it begins. I think it's just one of those drawbacks that as the months and years go by, as much as our team, then the Decred team, or everyone involved with atomic swaps, really, it's kind of a important challenge that we're all trying to find solutions to.
Yeah, I know Buck in the DCR DEX team. Buck is working on this reputation system for the bonds. It was mainly to do with the upcoming mesh network that's going into place, so that the actual servers relaying the order books aren't bad actors. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about the way that you could, basically spam somebody's fees where, and the cost of that. So that's a good point. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think they call it vampire attack or something like that. It's
Yeah.
kind of a theoretical thing. Of course, makes more sense with Bitcoin because the fees are so high.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of those theoretical vectors of attack, definitely. Ideally, you'd like to, lock the coins of both parties once they agree to make a swap so that it goes through, but then, you want everything to remain non-custodial as well. So how can you really do that? Yeah, there's lots of challenges, but
Yeah,
the tech is bound to keep on evolving, obviously.
I think on Decred, once it gets to the redemption part of it, that is pretty much irreversible. But it's those first two swaps where you're waiting for the first confirmations from the first party, and then the first confirmations from the second party. That's a bit where it's going to get.
Exactly.
That's where the
as soon as both lock transactions are broadcasted, then it's fine. But yeah, there's like a slight window at the beginning that people can back out essentially of swaps.
It's good to know that you guys are working on that. That's brilliant, and it's interesting to see that you've basically coming to the conclusion that what the DCR DEX team come to, where you kind of need this mechanism in place to stop that. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer because you'd want to avoid requiring people to put up more coins to, as Exitus mentioned. I'm sure it's a roadblock to adoption, or people might assume that, oh, the team is trying to squeeze their shitcoin into the process to, make money off of it. But really, when you look deeply at it, it's just a deep challenge with atomic swaps.
It's definitely caused. It definitely has caused an issue with onboarding for sure. And I mean, before the Fidelity bond system came in, we had the registration system, which was just a single fee of 0.1, and that was it. But with the Fidelity bond, obviously, it does eventually go back to the owner of the coins, but it does take a 60-day cycle to kind of go through the steps. So if they do misbehave, I'm not sure. There's like a scoring system where as long as I think it's either +1 or -1, you're fine. But as soon as it starts going down, that you won't see the fee come back or whatever. I have had I've done quite a few atomic swaps in the past. I have had one that got refunded, or it didn't kind of go through, and my score did go down. So I was kind of like in panic. Is this going to affect me? But no, apparently because I'd done so many good trades, it didn't. So that was quite an interesting thing to go through. Not very pleasant at the time, but it was it was nice to see that the system did work. Exitus, what's the next one?
Sure. So DCR DEX implements minimum lot sizes, so users don't pay more than 1% in mining fees per trade. For instance, a minimum trade on the Decred Bitcoin pair is 40 Decred, which is close to $1,000 per trade. And the reason is because the Bitcoin fees are quite high. We don't want users going in on, say, $100 swap and paying $10 in Bitcoin fees, and then they're gonna, you're paying a 10% fee in transaction fees, which is a really bad trading experience. So there's a minimum lot size that's quite high, and it kind of acts as a barrier, but we don't want users, getting screwed over on trading fees. And we'd like to know, does BasicSwap deal with this issue? Specifically, I would say for Bitcoin, because the other pairs, the fees are so low, it's not important.
We should specify that's mining fees, not trading fees.
Yeah. No, we don't have any minimum lot size or minimum value of transaction. The fee is kind of displayed when you create an offer on the order book. It calls for, on Bitcoin side, it calls the estimate smart fee function on Bitcoin Core. So it gives you an idea of how it's going to cost, but there's no hard limits or minimum trade sizes that users must abide to. We kind of leave that to the user if they want to go through paying X% of the swap value in fees, mining fees. We're more of the thinking that it's up to them. But yeah, we do use a function to display that fee.
Yes. Well, I mean, just to go back into personal experiences on DCR DEX, whenever Bitcoin goes through the roof on their mining fees, you can get caught out quite quickly. I had one probably about 6 months ago now. As the fees went up, I was paying something like, I think it was 14 virtual bytes, and it literally jumped to 40. And my transaction was just like, or my trade, my swap was stuck for a few days, which is quite annoying. We have a mechanism where you can actually put that up. I think it's up to 2 times. So if it was a 14, you can actually say, right, well, I want it up to 30 or whatever. But yeah, that can be a bit problematic. I've never had that on Litecoin, actually. I think Litecoin seems fairly stable. I think if you add a +1 times 1, it tends to go through within 15 minutes, which is absolutely fine. But certainly Bitcoin, I have to go to the what's the mempool thing called? I think it's just called mempool.
Just to see the traffic.
Yeah, just to make sure. Yeah, just to make sure you're going to fit into that slot. So, I mean, out of interest, how do you deal with these evaluations of mining fees? Do you do a similar thing where you check the block explorer first to make sure that the fee sits in that, or is it set over a period of time?
You mean personally, or just
on the platform?
The DEX?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no system to that, and it's really up to the user to verify on their end. But
So
from what we see in the chats and what people talk about, and I guess I would assume that it's similar for DCR DEX, but really the most used counterpart currency for almost any pair at this point is Litecoin, just because of the speed and the low cost. And Exitus and I did a swap, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and it just went super fast with Litecoin. It's just a painless process, really.
Yeah, I've never had any troubles in that respect with Litecoin. And I say Bitcoin, it does that. There is that issue, and I just wondered if when you do, because you said you display the mining fee before the trade goes through. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you display that, and does that come from the actual time, or is that kind of an evaluation over kind of the last few blocks, or how does that work?
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it's an average from the past few blocks. It's like a built-in function of Bitcoin Core. Would have to ask our dev exactly how it works from a technical perspective. But yeah, I do see what you're saying. There's a window in which, because that fee is displayed, it runs the function when you create an offer. So if you pick up an offer, it's a few hours after it's published on the order book, then yes, the mining fee might have gone up or down during that time. So yeah, I do see what you're saying. That's actually a good point, that we should be adding a function that maybe tells how much it's changed since that time. I hadn't
it's quite
seen it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite painful having to go over to the mempool block explorer just to make sure that your fee sits in that kind of area before you press the hit button, before you press the button. But like you say, with Litecoin, if I put the fee up to like 1 times, like to double the fee, it always goes through within 15 minutes, free confirmations. Which, yeah, I wish there was more orders actually on Litecoin on DCR DEX. For some reason, we just haven't been able to get their community involved. But the Litecoin platform is probably ideal for atomic swaps, in terms of just being quick, being cheap. So.
Well, my hope is the market maker bots are out, we can actually fill the orders, because what happens otherwise is people show up, there's no orders, and it's kind of like, okay, no one's trading here. Why bother? So, first impression is extremely important, and most people who show up aren't just gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna be the one to make the markets. So once that GUI is out for market makers,
Oh, we lost you, Exitus. We lost you. Are you back? Yeah, audio's gone, mate. Yeah. So yeah, once the market maker bot comes on, hopefully the Litecoin pair should increase, which I think is what Exitus was trying to conclude. Any luck, mate? You back yet?
It's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, right?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Exitus, did you want to finish what you're saying?
No, you guys finished for me. It's okay. I was just saying, I don't know where I cut off, but I was just saying it'll be easier to market to the Litecoin community once the books are filled, and you're not showing up to an empty order book. So that's my hope. But trading on Litecoins, it's great for both DCR DEX and BasicSwap.
What else have we got? Was that the last one, or is there more?
Yeah, we're past the hour mark. I think we covered just about everything. They covered all the questions I had.
I mean, I'd just like to reiterate for those that didn't join us at the beginning how great it is to have the BasicSwap guys in just to talk about this integration that we're getting hopefully for Decred, and how great it is that you guys are following this path of atomic swaps and feeless trading. I absolutely think it's amazing, and I really want to see a lot more kind of interaction between them. And I know once a proposal goes through on the Decred chain, it's really impressive how the Decred community gets behind that project. So it's great that it passed, I think, and it was overwhelming as well. I think, I can't remember, it was 20,000 votes and only 2,000 no votes or something like that. It was a really impressive vote. So absolutely great. Shall we just finish off with last comments? If we work around, Dr. Cap, is there anything you'd like to kind of say that we might have missed, or anything you would like to add?
No, I think just from what you was just saying there about maybe getting more liquidity on Litecoin, I think what we'll do is, CG, if it's okay, we can just DM a link to maybe a couple of individuals who may be able to create some openings there, because sometimes what I will say is certainly just from our experience, a lot of this, I think currency is a social phenomena. I really can't stress my belief in that. I think that if you look at the fiat system, it's a horrible system, but the whole thing driving it is essentially social faith and social consensus, social faith. And in order for these projects to work, we have to treat them as social phenomena, not necessarily as if you view them as economic phenomena, you're kind of detaching yourself a bit too much. I think that's my take on it. And certainly when it comes to things like liquidity, I think these are very much, social integrations, social connections with people talking, coming together. Exitus, I'm hoping you might be able to join us on our next privacy roundtable. If you're happy to sort of be a speaker from that point of view, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, for sure. I was
So, I mean-
listening in on the last one for most of it. I think someone might have mentioned my name, but I didn't have my mic set
I
up.
really wanted to invite you. I was listening in. I was just thinking, I saw you in the audience. I was like, I just wanted to bring you on stage.
Yeah, I
If you were okay
I
with
thought
it.
it was a select group of speakers, sometimes in spaces. I didn't realize I could volunteer, but it was a great talk nonetheless.
But like I said, I think it's about the projects all talking to each other on a person-to-person level. You know, there are teams, developers, communities behind them, and I think once you've got those networks in place, you can then get the liquidity networks in place, and that's how you make these projects successful long term.
Yeah, great insight there. How about you, CG? Is there anything you want to kind of finish up with? Anything you want to add?
Not really. I think we covered a lot of things, and actually this could have gone for much longer, I'm sure. But no, just thank you again to the whole Decred community for, you know, supporting the team and seeing also the vision behind what we do, and also by some extension what you guys do with DCR DEX as well. I think that both of our projects and communities are perfectly aligned, and you know, although we have some different approaches to things, I think that's wonderful that the, you know, DEX landscape is evolving at a time that it needs to be evolving with everything that's happening with centralized exchanges right now. So just grateful and excited to have Decred be part of the whole ecosystem that we're building, and we really hope that soon, once we merge everything together with the marketplace and the DEX, it's really going to be, you know, building more bridges between the communities and, you know, furthering the mission that we're all working on. So really excited about what's coming up.
Oh, brilliant.
And thank you for
where-
having us on, obviously, to this show. It was a great time.
It's been a real pleasure, actually, both of you guys. And where can people find you guys?
We do have a website at BasicSwapDEX.com, the same way it's pronounced. The mother or broader project is Particle.io, Particle without an E. Otherwise, we're on Twitter, Reddit, Telegram, Matrix, Discord, the whole range of platforms. All the links are available on either of our website, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Oh, great stuff. No, and I'll just conclude by just saying how great it is to have both of you on. It's been an absolutely fantastic discussion. It's been a real pleasure, and hopefully, once the integration's been built, maybe we'll get you back on, and we'll do a live onboarding session or something like that, just to kind of promote it a bit more.
Awesome.
Yeah, brilliant. Exitus, you get the sign off.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic you guys have chosen a different route of doing things with BasicSwap DEX, because it gives users, you know, a choice. Maybe some people will prefer the way DCR DEX operates, maybe some will prefer the way BasicSwap DEX operates, and that's great. People have a choice. And of course, you guys have the XMR atomic swaps, which is something Decred holders have been asking for on DCR DEX maybe since the beginning of DCR DEX in 2018. So it's great that that's going to be there for people. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on here. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you soon.